Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be cracking open, well, a time capsule of sorts.
Oh,
But instead of, like old photos and stuff, we're going through a single issue of a journal
okay.
called The Fourth Decade, Volume 3, Issue 5. And it's all about JFK assassination research.
That's cool. So what makes this issue, this specific one, so interesting?
Well, this one kind of goes beyond all those, like, well-trodden theories.
Right.
It focuses on lesser-known incidents and individuals that are all connected to Lee Harvey Oswald.
Interesting.
Yeah, it offers like a fresh perspective on everything that led up to that day in Dallas.
I see. It's like we're getting a glimpse into how those dedicated researchers, how they're
Yeah,
thinking.
exactly. We have articles, letters, even updates on some previous investigations all woven together.
I bet it's not like a neat and tidy narrative, is it?
No, not at all, which I think is really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. That's where the real value is, I think.
Totally.
Like we're presented with all these different viewpoints, lots of them conflicting. And it forces us to actually think critically and like come to our own conclusions.
Exactly. So, with this issue of the fourth decade, it raises some questions that I bet you haven't considered before.
Like what?
Well, for example, did Oswald have even more like mysterious connections than we even realize?
Okay, yeah.
Were there like attempts to discredit certain people, maybe groups, to kind of steer the whole investigation in one specific direction?
That's interesting.
Yeah, and that's a key theme in this issue.
Yeah.
It's the potential like manipulation of information
I see.
and how even the smallest details, seemingly insignificant details,
Yeah,
can take on this huge significance, when you're piecing together a complex event like this.
that makes sense.
Okay, so let's start with the New Orleans Council for Peaceful Alternatives, or NOCPA.
Okay.
This section explores a potential attempt to, like, misrepresent the group
Mm.
and link them to Oswald.
Okay. So how does this section start out?
Well, it begins with an article by Hugh Murray. He references a report by Lieutenant Francis Martello.
Yeah.
He was with the New Orleans Police Department.
Yeah.
And Martello claims that Oswald admitted to going to meetings near a Tulane professor's residence.
Okay, so they're trying to imply a connection to the NOCPA.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if we just stop there, it might seem like, oh, wow, this is a big piece of evidence, right?
Right.
But the fourth decade doesn't shy away from the counter-arguments.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so former NOCPA members, like Professor Robert Reinders,
Hmm.
they really strongly refute Martello's claims.
Okay, what do they say?
They basically say, unequivocally, that those individuals Martello named, like Professors Reisman and Laviolette,
Right.
they were never members of the NOCPA.
So that makes you wonder, why would Martello make that claim then?
Right. Was it, like, a genuine misunderstanding?
Yeah.
Or was he actually trying to mislead the Warren Commission?
And if it was intentional, I mean, what would be the point, right?
Yeah, exactly. And to add, like, another layer, we have Ruth Klopfer. She's a Quaker who knew Oswald.
Really?
Yeah. And Marina, his wife.
Wow.
And she describes Oswald as evasive and recalls him making, like, these strange statements about guns.
Wow.
Hmm.
So even though Klopfer never mentions a connection between Oswald and the NOCPA,
Right.
her account is still really valuable.
Mm,
It helps us understand Oswald a little better.
yeah. It highlights how important personal testimony is,
Yeah.
especially when you're dealing with something like this, shrouded in so much mystery.
Okay, so stepping back, looking at the NOCPA's activities as a whole,
Right.
they were pretty typical of like a ban the bomb group.
Yeah, exactly. Demonstrations, meetings, all advocating for peace.
Okay.
And they probably disbanded by the summer of '63.
Oh, wow. So that was months before the assassination.
Exactly.
So the big question then is, if Martello's information was made up,
Right.
why would someone go through all that trouble to connect Oswald to like this harmless group?
Yeah. Like, was it to discredit the peace movement? Or maybe divert attention from something else?
It's like a puzzle.
It is. This section of the fourth decade really makes you think critically about the information we're given.
Yeah, for sure. You can't just accept things at face value.
No, not at all. Especially with something as complex and as controversial as this.
So if you thought that was interesting, wait till you hear this.
Oh.
This next section of the journal takes us to Rhinelander, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin?
Yeah, a place you probably wouldn't think has any connection to Lee Harvey Oswald, right?
No, not at all.
This is where the fourth decade is really great at, like, digging up those little details.
Yeah.
That might be the key to something bigger. We're talking about a trip.
A trip.
Yeah, a potentially unknown trip. Oswald took in September of '63.
Wow. So, a period of his life that's still kind of mysterious.
Exactly.
Okay, so how does this mystery start?
Well, it starts with them finding Oswald's signature in a guest book. Yeah, at a Wisconsin restaurant. But the real story comes from the Boudreaux family.
Who are they?
They owned a music and appliance store in Rhinelander.
Okay.
So, picture this. Margaret Boudreaux, she owns the store,
Okay.
and this man and his pregnant wife come in,
Okay.
and they seem to only speak Russian.
Really?
Yeah, they buy a portable radio, but the man refuses to give his name for the warranty. Eventually, he says his name is Homer Walker Jr. from Texas.
Homer Walker Jr. Okay.
And to make it even stranger, the wife and a young child are waiting outside in the car for hours.
Wow.
And it seems like they're trying to stay hidden.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's what made Margaret suspicious.
Well, yeah, especially with how strangely the man was acting.
Right. And she was right to be suspicious. It was later confirmed that it was Lee and Marina Oswald.
What? Really?
Yeah. The Boudreaux, unfortunately, they lost the sales slip.
Ah, with the car's license plate?
Yeah, exactly.
That's too bad.
But after they saw photos of the Oswalds in the news, they realized they had encountered them.
Wow. Just weeks before the assassination.
Exactly. So the question is, what was Oswald doing in Rhinelander, Wisconsin?
Yeah. I mean, was it just a random road trip or was there something more to it?
Right. The fourth decade explores a few possibilities.
Like what?
Well, could he have been there for secret meetings?
Okay.
Did he have any connections to the pro-Castro Fair Play for Cuba Committee?
Right. They were active in Wisconsin at the time.
Exactly. And it's especially interesting because we know so little about Oswald's movements.
Yeah, in those months leading up to the assassination.
Right. This trip to Rhinelander makes you think that maybe there are these huge gaps in what we know.
About Oswald's life, his motives, all of it.
Exactly.
And if that trip wasn't intriguing enough,
Right.
the journal has another twist. Oswald's employment records at the William Riley Coffee Company in New Orleans. They say that he was working during the day, but his landlady, Mrs. Jessie Garner, claimed he was at home most of the time.
Oh, wow. So those are conflicting accounts.
Yeah.
So it raises questions about what Oswald was actually doing.
Right. Was he secretly involved in something else?
It's hard to say.
This is what the fourth decade does so well.
What's that?
It gives us these, like, tantalizing bits of information.
Yeah.
These discrepancies and inconsistencies, and it makes us become detectives ourselves.
I love that.
It reminds us that history is rarely straightforward.
Oh, absolutely.
It's messy, contradictory, and full of unanswered questions.
And that's what makes it so fascinating, especially with something as impactful as the JFK assassination.
Right, okay. Well, we've only just begun to scratch the surface here with this deep dive into the fourth decade.
I bet there's so much more to uncover.
Yeah, more evidence, more debates, more mysteries.
Oh, I can't wait. And you'll see how even the smallest details can really change how we view this whole event.
Okay, let's get into it then. Okay, so we've looked at the NOCPA and then that weird trip to Rhinelander, Wisconsin.
Right.
But now, let's move on to something else pretty important. The death of Officer J.D. Tippit
Okay, yeah.
happened right after the president was shot.
Right.
This section of the fourth decade digs into the forensic evidence
Okay.
and shows how even, like, scientific data, it can be up for debate, especially in a case this big.
Yeah, it makes sense.
So the journal lays out all the initial reports, the witness testimonies.
Right.
And it's kind of all over the place.
I bet, especially with how many shots were fired.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where the autopsy report becomes important.
Oh, okay.
It was done by Dr. Earl F. Rose.
Okay.
He describes 4 gunshot wounds.
Okay.
But here's the thing. He doesn't mention any powder tattooing around the head wound.
Powder tattooing?
Yeah, sorry. Can you explain what that is for those of us who aren't, like, forensic experts?
Yeah, sure. No problem. Powder tattooing, or stippling, it happens when those little particles of gunpowder get embedded in the skin around the wound.
Okay.
You usually see it when the shots are fired, close range.
I see.
So if there's no powder tattooing, it could mean that the shot that killed Officer Tippit,
Right.
maybe it wasn't as close range as they thought.
Which makes you question the whole official story, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, if Oswald really shot Tippit close range, like they say,
Yeah.
wouldn't there be powder burns?
Yeah, you'd think so.
And it gets even more complicated when you realize some of the autopsy photos are gone.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the FBI report says there are 5 photos.
Right.
but the National Archives only has 4.
Wow.
And of those, there's only 1 photo of that head wound.
So we're missing evidence then?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Which, of course, leads to all sorts of speculation.
Makes sense. Well, what can we see in the one head wound photo that we do have?
Well, if you look closely, it kind of looks like there might be another wound. Yeah, like pointing upwards, near the one described in the report.
Hmm.
And that's a big deal, because it means Oswald might not have shot Tippit from behind.
Oh, okay.
Like the official story says.
So it's like we're trying to solve a puzzle, but we don't have all the pieces.
Exactly.
We have forensic evidence that's incomplete, and then we have witnesses saying totally different things.
Right. Like Mrs. Helen Markham, who saw the shooting. She says Tippit was shot twice in the head.
Oh, wow.
Which goes against both the official story and what the autopsy report says.
And there's the statement from FBI agent James P. Hosty, too, right?
Oh, yeah, good point. He was actually tracking Oswald in Dallas then.
Right.
And he says 5 shots were fired.
Okay.
And that Tippit had this big entry wound on his chest, like bigger than normal.
Yeah, maybe because the bullet hit a button.
Right, possibly.
So Hosty's account doesn't match up with the official reports either.
Nope.
It's all very strange.
It is. Makes you wonder if they tried to downplay how many shots there were.
Yeah. And why?
Right. With all these conflicting accounts, it's hard not to get caught up in the mystery.
It really is.
You just have to wonder if maybe they messed up the investigation, or if they were hiding something on purpose.
That's the question, isn't it?
It is. And the 4th decade doesn't give us a straight answer.
Right.
It just shows us the evidence, the differences, and the different testimonies.
And lets us make up our own minds.
Exactly.
Which is what makes this deep dive so interesting.
I know, right? It's not about being told what to believe.
It's about, like, engaging with the evidence.
Yeah.
Thinking about the different perspectives. And coming to our own informed opinions.
Absolutely. And this next section takes us even deeper into that.
Oh.
It moves away from the specific events, and it looks at, like, the whole JFK research community.
Okay.
All the debates and controversies.
That sounds interesting. What about the Zapruder film?
Oh, yeah. That's a big one.
It seems like they've analyzed every single frame.
Pretty much. And for good reason. It's a really important piece of evidence.
Right.
But it's also the cause of a lot of arguments.
Makes sense. So what does the 4th decade say about it?
Well, there's this back and forth between researcher Howard Platzman and some other researchers who think the film might not be real.
Oh, wow. So we have experts disagreeing with each other.
Yeah.
That's always interesting. What are they arguing about?
Well, Platzman, he says his colleagues have hyperperspicacity.
What's that?
Basically, they're seeing conspiracies everywhere.
Oh, I see.
He wants them to be more, like, disciplined in their research.
Okay.
Focus on the big questions, not get lost in all the little details.
I mean, but we're talking about a possible cover-up, right?
Right.
Wouldn't it make sense to look at everything really carefully?
Exactly. And that's what researchers like Jerry Rose, Alan Eaglesham, and Harrison Livingstone argue.
Oh.
They say their investigations are necessary, especially if evidence has been tampered with. They point to things like the head snap, the frontal head wound.
Right.
All these things that make you question the film.
So it's like 2 different ways of thinking.
Yeah. Some think the simplest explanation is probably right, and others think there's a cover-up hidden everywhere.
And we see those 2 viewpoints playing out in the 4th decade?
Exactly.
Fascinating stuff.
And the debate goes beyond the Zapruder film. The 4th decade also looks at that photo of Oswald holding a rifle.
Oh, right. The one they showed everywhere after the assassination.
Yeah.
The one that made it seem like Oswald was the lone gunman.
That's the one. But researcher Walt Cakebread, he argues that the sling in the photo, it's not right.
Really?
Yeah. He says it doesn't match the rifle they found at the Texas School Book Depository.
Oh.
Like there's a sling swivel in the photo, but it doesn't match. So either it's a different rifle or they changed the photo.
That's a big deal.
It is. It makes you question all the photo evidence.
Yeah, for sure.
And the 4th decade doesn't stop there. They also look at the Towner slide and a photo taken by Lieutenant J.C. Day.
Oh, wow.
It all adds to the debate, showing how hard it is to understand the visual evidence.
It seems like every piece of evidence just leads to more questions.
It does, and it shows that history isn't always clear-cut.
Right.
It can be messy, full of contradictions.
And open to different interpretations.
Exactly. And for the JFK assassination, people still want to find the truth.
Yeah.
They want to understand what happened, one of the most important and tragic events in American history.
For sure.
And this deep dive into the 4th decade, it shows how much people still want to understand.
Okay, so we've seen attempts to discredit groups, A mysterious trip, conflicting evidence, and experts disagreeing.
Right. And a lot going on.
What else is in this issue of the fourth decade?
Well, just when you think you've seen it all, there's this letter from a reader.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Brian Lindstrom. He asks why Lyndon Johnson didn't have Secret Service protection when he left Parkland Hospital after Kennedy died.
That's interesting. You'd think they'd be super careful after that.
Right.
But the letter says Johnson was basically unprotected.
Yeah. So was it a mistake?
Yeah, or was there something else going on?
It's just another one of those things that makes you think there's more to the story.
Exactly. And that's what the fourth decade is trying to tell us.
What do you mean?
It's telling us to question everything, to dig deeper, to think about all the possibilities.
I see.
With the JFK assassination, the official story doesn't answer everything.
Right.
So we have to look at the evidence ourselves and decide what we think happened.
And that's what makes this so great.
Yeah.
It's not about getting the answers.
It's about the journey of figuring it out.
Mm-hmm. Learning about the history.
Yeah.
Accepting that we might not know everything.
Exactly. It's crazy. It's like decades later, and we're still talking about the JFK assassination.
I know. It's amazing how it still gets people so interested, all the research going on.
Yeah. This deep dive into the fourth decade, I mean, it's really shown me how complicated this whole thing is.
Yeah, for sure. It really shows how this event, I mean, it really affected America, you know?
Yeah.
Like the assassination of a young president, and so public and so shocking, it's like it changed how the country thinks.
I think what struck me most with this issue was how much conflicting information there is.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like with Martello's report on the NOCPA and then Oswald's trip to Rhinelander and all the discrepancies in the Tippit case.
Right.
Even the experts disagreeing about the Zapruder film.
Yeah. It shows that history isn't always like black and white, you know? It's more like shades of gray. You have to look at it from all these different angles, and a lot of times you just don't have all the information.
It's almost like we have to be detectives ourselves, sifting through everything.
Exactly. We have to weigh the different accounts and then decide what we think happened.
And that's where critical thinking comes in, right?
Oh, absolutely.
We can't just believe the first thing we hear.
No, definitely not. You have to question things, look for other explanations.
Yeah, even if it means changing how we think about things.
Right.
This issue of the fourth decade, it doesn't give us all the answers.
No, it doesn't.
But it does give us, like, a ton of evidence, and a lot of it doesn't even make sense together, so we have to figure it out ourselves.
Exactly.
It reminds us that history isn't just set in stone.
Okay.
It's something we keep looking at, rethinking as we find out new things.
And that's what makes it so interesting. Like the JFK assassination and other big events, they still get debated. People still want to research them because there's still so much we don't know.
Makes you think about, like, the limits of what we can know about the past.
Definitely.
This deep dive has really shown me how important it is to look at things from different perspectives, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
To be open-minded and to actually talk about these things.
It's a good reminder that history isn't just facts and dates.
Yeah.
It's like an ongoing conversation.
Right, we're all part of it, trying to figure out what it all means.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Look at the fourth decade. I mean, it's shown us that even the smallest things can be really important.
Right.
It makes us rethink what we thought we knew, and it opens up all these possibilities.
Yeah, and history is full of surprises, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, what do you think? Any particular thing that stood out to you?
That's a good question.
Did this change how you think about the JFK assassination at all?
Yeah, definitely. I hope this deep dive made you want to learn more about this, you know.
Yeah.
Keep asking questions, keep looking for different viewpoints, and then decide for yourself what you think happened.
Yeah, exactly. The JFK assassination, it's a story that just won't go away.
Yeah.
It's like a reminder that the past still affects us today.
Right. It shapes how we see the world, how we look for the truth, even when things are uncertain and the information is confusing.
Well said.
Okay, so we'll leave you with all these mysteries of the JFK assassination. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep talking about this. It's important.